All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today we're actually talking about how America got involved with World War One. You're going to see how they were before and then what changed because some did happen, and you're going to see how one country viewed America because of our stance on isolationism. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So here's your objectives. We're going to analyze the significance of the American involvement in Mexico. We're going to look at that first. Yeah, you're probably wondering, what does Mexico got to do with the United States joining World War One? Believe it or not, it does have a significance, and we're going to get to that. We're going to examine the importance of Germany sinking passenger ships, and I use the word passenger with quotations because you're going to hear about something, and it's pretty interesting. And we're creating an argument on whether Mexico would have accepted the terms of the Zimmerman telegram if the message wasn't intercepted. Okay, this is the very key thing that happened during this time. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at your warm up. All right, so if you were kind of confused, like what is that thing? The title up on top should explain what it is. All right, so what do you think this artist is trying to say about the German military power? Okay, this is a pretty easy warm up for you guys. Okay, so what do you think this artist is trying to say? Okay, so think about it, pause the video, write your response, because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so in April 1914, some American soldiers they went to Tampico, Mexico, and they got a little drunk. They were raising a little hell down there, and they got arrested, right? And just like they do with drunk people nowadays, for public intoxication and things like that, once the next morning comes, they're getting over the hangover. They release them, and that's exactly what the Mexican police did. They released the soldiers, like, okay, guys, you had your fun. All right, now go on back. So when these soldiers showed back up at their camp, and they were like, "Hey, where were you guys?" The guys were like, "Oh man, we had a fun night, but man, we got arrested in Mexico." And their commander was like, "Who arrested you?" And they told him, "Hey, the Mexican police in this town, Tampico." So the commander basically told the police people there, "You guys owe us an apology for arresting our soldiers." And they're like, "You got to be kidding me. We're not going to apologize for doing something you guys probably would have done to our people. If our people went on your side and started drinking, things like that, acting a fool, you would have done the same thing. So, no." So they didn't get it. Now, President Wilson saw this as an opportunity to basically overthrow Mexico's president Huerta. Okay, because he didn't really like him. They weren't seeing eye to eye to things in with America and Mexico relations. So he's like, "This is a great opportunity." You know, basically the Mexicans are arresting American soldiers just because and things like that. They're treating them horribly. So they kind of use this as a justification to overthrow the Mexican government. So a lot of Mexican citizens were upset because they're like, "Okay, yeah, you might not like our president, but he's our president. We picked him. He may not be the best, but hey, this is the guy we want." And yeah, no, the United States interfered, came in, and basically they had a little mediation that took place, and Carranza became the new president of Mexico. Now, why him? Well, because again, he saw a little bit more eye to eye with the American President Wilson. Excuse me. And also, his army was supplied with U.S. weapons when they overthrew Huerta. Okay. Now, the Mexican forces, the Mexican people who didn't like Carranza, uh, they went and basically started a revolution. Okay. Because again, they opposed him. And so what they did was they tried to like poke at the beast of the American beast. So they would conduct raids in the US and trying to get Wilson to intervene, going, "Hey, you know what? You're not doing your job, Carranza. You're not doing, you know, keep control of these people. If you don't, I'll get rid of you." That's what they were kind of hoping for. So this guy right here you see in the picture, that is the famous Pancho Villa. Some of you guys may have heard of him, some of you guys may not. Um, there's like myths and legends and things about him. Now, the thing is with Villa, what he did that was significant in American history was that he actually went into the town of Columbus, New Mexico, and basically burned down the town. Okay. And as you can imagine, American citizens were killed. And this sparked an outrage, right? And Wilson sent 6,000 soldiers into Mexico to try to get Villa. Now, here's a little personal history thing of myself. Excuse me. My great grandpa was basically 14 years old when the Mexican government came into my great great grandma's house and basically said, "How old's the boy?" And she told them, "Oh, he's 12." They're like, "Fine, we're gonna take him." And they basically enlisted him, you know. And his job, one of his jobs, was to try to track Villa. And he said, because I was there, I was like 8 years old when he was telling the story. The closest they ever got to catching Villa was the dust from the horse from the very last man was hitting their face. That's the closest they ever got to catching Pancho Villa. The U.S. never got to him. The Mexicans didn't until after the Revolutionary War was ended. Okay. Now, World War One erupts, and President Wilson basically declares that the United States is going to remain neutral, meaning we're not picking either side, the Central or the Allies. We're not picking with the Germans or the British and them. No, no, we're keeping away. Um, the reason for that is because a lot of Americans, if you remember from last class, felt no, no, that's over in Europe. Let them deal with their own things. But there were some Americans who felt that we should support either one side or the other. Now, many German Americans, and there were about 8 million or so in our country at that time, basically said we need to support Germany, you know, mainly because we're Germans. That was their argument. But there was 4.5 million Irish people who felt that we should not support the British because the British, all they do is control. All they did is basically go into different countries around the world and take over, imperialism type of thing. And the Irish are like, no, no, the British need to stop because then if they win, then they'll continue on throughout the world. So they wanted the US to join the Central Powers. But then there were some Americans who felt, we have more of a connection with England. We get along with them now really well. And some people even were like looking back in their history and going, you know what? We should really help out France because France was with us during the French and during the Revolution, during our revolution. They helped us out. They didn't have to. They were going through a terrible time themselves in their country, but yet they came and helped us. We need to be there for them. So have basically part of the country says with the Central Powers, some of them say with the Allied powers. Excuse me. So Americans were kind of torn. Okay. Now, there were some propaganda posters that were created to kind of sway people's opinions. So you see this picture right here, loose lips might sink ships. Basically, when if you're working on a shipping yard and you're like you go off to have a drink, they're telling you, hey, keep your mouth shut. Don't talk about what you're seeing there, what you're working on. Don't give details about the specifics of your boat because there might be spies on the other side. They might be listening and, they might do a sabotage. Okay. Now, did just one side use this? No, no, no. Both sides use propaganda posters and things like that. Germany's propaganda posters mainly focused on Russian, basically saying how Russians are so evil, they're horrible people. They'll drink your blood, things like that. I mean, just outlandish stuff. The British propaganda was more skillful, more tactical, aiming at certain things. You know. Now, this is something I read, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta tell you guys these stories." So one of the stories that was being told about the German U-boats is, how they were sinking all these ships, right? Well, I don't know if you know this, but when a ship sinks and the body drowns, sometimes the bodies will float up, because of the air inside and density and things like that. So the rumor was that the Germans were collecting the dead bodies and using them for fertilizer in their gardens back home. That they were using the bodies as soap, boiling it down and using it as soap. Were these true? Absolutely not. Guys, when these guys were in submarines, they didn't just go for one time in a trip and then go back home. No, they were out there for a long time. So the whole thing of taking bodies home and putting the bodies in the garden so their flowers can grow, no, no. And using the bodies as soap, absolutely ridiculous. But here's the thing though, it kind of worked because it persuaded some Americans to be like, oh, these Germans are so horrible. Oh, how could they do that? So more people sided with the Allies. Now, did everyone believe those stories? Probably not. They probably already had their decision made. It's just with these stories now they can solidify, they can justify saying, "Oh, I'm definitely going against Germany because I heard the stories about them." But they more likely already had their minds made up, or they were already leaning a certain way. So this was just that little nudge. You know. Now here's the thing: America, while we were still being neutral, we loaned money to both sides. But here's the kicker: we limited the amount of money we would lend Germany, whereas Britain and France, we basically said, "Hey, how much borrow how much as you want." But Germany, man, hey, your credit's about man, you go lend you about $500,000, things like that. We limited them. Now in the North Sea, the British created a blockade of ships because again, to get to Germany from the sea, you have to go to the North Sea. And now that they created this blockade, German submarines and ships, they really couldn't get supplies. They had to get it from elsewhere. So the um, the British seized any type of contraband going into Germany. So if Germany was taking, let's say, artwork from Portugal into their country, these guys would stop them and things like that. Now, here's the thing, though, too. Germany knew Britain's an island, France is over here. Their country's torn up because of World War One with the trench warfare and things like that. So the Allies really depended heavily on food, equipment, and other supplies from the United States. Now their hope was this: as the ships were coming from America to Britain, that they could stop those ships and then basically starve out Britain and France. So it's not actually not a bad plan. So February 1915, Germany announced, "Hey, any ship going to Britain, we're going to attack you. This is your warning. This is actually your last warning. Because if you go with these boats, we will sink you." Now, on May 7th, 1915, a German U boat sank a British liner called the Lusitania. Now, why is this insignificant? Because the way the ship sank, it sank so fast that nearly 1,200 people died, um, including 128 Americans. And this really ticked off the Americans. The Germans basically said, no, no, no. Okay, you don't understand. There were weapons in that ship. We know there were weapons. The Americans and the British were like, no, no, no. That was a passenger ship. There were no weapons on that ship. There was no ammunition, no nothing like that. They attacked a passenger ship that they knew was just nothing but people, you know. Sorry about that. Here's the thing, guys. Um, we now know because we can deep dive and things like that, check out the boats, that there really was ammunition in that boat. The way the explosion happened and things like that, it explains also how fast Why did that ship sink so fast? It was because of ammunition in there. And we only found out about it, I believe, in the 1980s. So basically, like 60, 70 years later, we find out about the truth. The Germans were right. There were ammunition in that boat. Um, so not only that, but in March 1916, a German U-boat sank a French passenger ship called the Suez. And again, several Americans were on that boat, and there's a picture of it on the bottom there. You can see it basically tore in half. And there were Americans on that boat, and they were injured. So, I'm sorry about that. To avoid Americans siding with the Allies, the German gave this thing called the Suez Pledge, basically saying, okay, we're no longer going to attack passenger ships without warning. We're going to let them know, hey, we're here, German U boat right here. Do not pass us. Okay. If you guys do have passengers, we want to check it. We want to inspect the ship and things like that. So, again, they don't want the United States to join the Allies. All right. So, President Wilson runs again for the 1916 election. And basically, he says, I am the peace candidate. You know, I have not sent any troops overseas to war, things like that. And basically, he says that I will not send troops over, things like. So he basically saying, I'm the one, not Congress, me. I'm the one who's not sending troops over. And that's going to play a role later on. Okay. Now, January 1917, a German official named Arthur Zimmerman, he was cabled a letter, right? Now, the thing is, he is the German ambassador in Mexico. So, if you don't know about how it works, every country basically has ambassadors. So, in our country, we have ambassadors from Mexico, Germany, Russia, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Nigeria, wherever. We have ambassadors here. Also, we have ambassadors in those countries as well. And these guys are basically like the frontmen, the representatives of our country in their country and their country in ours. Okay. And basically, he got a message from the German government saying, make this offer to the Mexican government. Now, here's the thing, this was the offer. This is what this paper you see with all these codes, this is what it basically says. It says, if the US joined the war against Germany, and if Mexico allied themselves with Germany, then Germany would help Mexico regain the lost land from the US. Now, what lost land are they talking about? Basically, the land that Mexico lost during the Mexican American War. So, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, parts of Oregon, things like that. To say we can help you get all that back. But that's if the US joins the war and they go against us. And then you guys, you, Mexico, pledge to be allies with us, then we'll help you get that land back. This became known as the Zimmerman telegram. And once word spread out that this message, this offer was given, oh, oh, it ticked off so many Americans. And basically, were like getting them like wanting to join the war. Now, once the Germans heard about this, they said, you know what? The heck with you guys. We're going to return to unrestricted submarine warfare, meaning we're going back to the old ways. We're not going to give you warning. If you bring your ships anywhere near here, we're going to attack you. Now, why did Germany do this? Two things. One, they really truly believed they were on the verge of starving out Britain and France. And in retrospect, looking back, they are actually right. They really were close. Britain and France were really running out of food. They also believed the second thing was they believed the U.S. wouldn't fight. They believed that the U.S. were all talk and no bite. Oh, here they are talking all this big game. They never really fought a true power. When's the last time they actually won against a big country? Britain back in the revolution times. They got their butts kicked in the War of 1812 against the British. So the second time they fought, they lost. And then they had a war against themselves. Whoop, whoop. And then they went against Spain. Ooh, Spain. You know, Germany's like, they haven't fought us. We are the top dogs. So let them come. So from February 3rd to March 21st, they sank six American merchant ships without warning. And this is where President Wilson basically draws a line and says, he calls a special session of Congress, which a president can do, and then he asks them for a declaration of war, and he gets it. And it's a declaration of war against Germany. All right, so right away, 2 million men volunteer for the U.S. to fight for the U.S. But there were some people who were like, man, 2 million, that's actually not enough. And they felt that a draft would be needed be to be implemented to get more men to fight. So they did that. 400,000 African Americans were drafted into the war. But here's the thing, this is where it gets kind of like, wait, why? 400,000 were drafted, but only 42,000 of them actually served overseas as combat troops. The rest of them were still in America, but only 42,000 served overseas, actually fighting. Okay, and yeah, there were some others that were sent over, but they were mainly like cooks, you know, doing inventory, things like that, not really fighting. Only 42,000 of them really fought. And then those troops that were fighting, they were segregated. So they were like, here's the black unit, here's the white units. And in the black units, the black regiments and stuff like that, they were under the guidance of a white officer. So there couldn't even be a black officer to guide them. No, 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 because that means you would be above the white soldiers, some white soldiers. You know, the private stuff. If you're a lieutenant, hey, you're above these guys, and that's no, 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 no. Especially at this time, remember? Now, if you look at this map here, you'll see that little red lines on both sides in Russia and in France. That's the trenches. Those were the big ones. Okay. And it ripped through right through France and Russia, Romania, things like that. Now, what are trenches? Basically, these are big old holes dug on both sides, right? The Germans were great engineers, so their trenches were amazing. Don't get me wrong, the French and English had pretty good trenches, but the engineering level on the German side were wow, pretty amazing compared to the French and British. And basically, they left a large part of area in between the trenches. This is where they would mow down each other with machine guns. Okay, this area between the two trenches, between the French, German, or French and here's Germans, that area between became known as no man's land because no man could basically survive it if you were out there by yourself. And people who fought in it basically knew if I get stuck out here, I'm done. So here's my question to you. If the Zimmerman telegram wasn't intercepted and America had no idea about this offer, do you think Mexico would have taken it? Do you think Mexico would have been like, you know what? Yeah, what do we got to lose? Or do you think they'd have been like, you know what? Nah, 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 nah. We just finished a revolution and things like that. What do you think? What do you think they would have fall under? Do you think they would have taken it or no? And explain why. Okay, don't forget to explain why. So, with that being said, you guys, that's it for this lesson. Hopefully, you learned something new. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. Next class, we'll be talking about famous Americans who were in World War One and what they went through. Some of these guys were just wow. Okay, so if you're watching in class, be sure you get your vocab done, your research. Make sure you get that done as well. Remember, do not have duplicate information down on your research paper. Okay, so I don't want to see on there he was born in 1905, 1805. I'm sorry, like three times. Should not even be two times. Okay, all new information. Okay, uh, so that's it. All right, so you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later.